Good morning and welcome to Politico Europe's third or perhaps fourth event on hydrogen and the energy transition. I'm America Hernandez, energy reporter, and we have a lot to get through today, so I'm very excited to be back in Brussels, back to school. It's been just about a year and a half now, I think, that the EU hydrogen strategy was published in July of 2020. We've got the goals to be carbon neutral by 2050, very significant greenhouse gas reductions by 2030. But now that we are about, let's see, 18 months out, I'm very eager to share with you some updates with some of our speakers that are coming about the legislative points that are going to be hitting this fall. You know, we've got the Fit for 55 package that came out this July that's going to have a recast renewable energy directive for all of the renewable-based hydrogen that will be pumping in volumes in the next 10, 20, 30 years. We've got a decarbonized gas package, I believe, coming at the end of the year. And we've also got a few shorter-term project announcements on hydrogen. So I'm very happy to present our European Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simpson, who's with us this morning. We also have the Portuguese Minister of Energy and Environment, João Pedro Matos Fernandes. We have Jorgo Chatzimarkakis, CEO of Hydrogen Europe Industry Group. And we have Representative Jens Geier, Socialists and Democrats from Germany, as well as a few other industry voices we'll be bringing out later. But first, I will remind that this event is sponsored by Shell, so we will be hearing very briefly from Elizabethnton, Executive Vice President of Renewables and Energy Solutions from Shell.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. We really appreciate the opportunity to join you today. We are just 8 weeks away from COP26, and what many are calling the last opportunity to take meaningful steps that keep the goals of the Paris Agreement attainable. In fact, the IPCC recently said that without immediate, rapid, and large-scale reductions, the Paris goals would be beyond reach. Now, I'm an optimist leading our hydrogen and renewables business, and I'm also a practical realist. So let me say this. I believe the greatest and fastest change now will come from focused collaboration across business, government, and society, working sector by sector to identify and aggressively pursue carbon reduction goals. Fit for 55, released this summer, provides for a robust framework to make this happen and a unique opportunity for the European Union to lead the way, demonstrating how we can get to climate neutrality by 2050 while staying competitive and leaving no one behind. And Shell intends to do all that we can focused on the transition through greater investments in clean energy solutions such as hydrogen. As a company, we have committed to reach net zero by 2050, and our customers, together, we look for Fit for 55 to deliver exactly what it says on the tin, ambitious climate targets to ensure investment confidence, strong carbon pricing, and a premium for innovative technologies that need to be deployed at scale at a systems level, such as hydrogen and renewables, through greater renewable mandates in key sectors such as transport and heavy industry. As a result, the combined application of legislative initiatives in Fit for 55 should ensure every major economic sector has a viable pathway to net zero that is consistent with 2050 climate neutrality. What's crucial about Fit for 55 is that it translates ambition into practical action. Now, this is exciting. And it points to opportunities where governments, business, and civil society can and will work together to accelerate the transition. Let's take the example of hydrogen, which Shell believes to be a vital tool to decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors, like industry, heavy-duty transport, and steel. The Hydrogen Council predicts that by 2050, hydrogen could power 15 to 20 million trucks. It could deliver 5% of the global fuel supply to airplanes and freight ships, and hydrogen-powered trains could replace up to 1/5 of the world's diesel trains. Now that's progress. But these examples are only possible if government and business take action to promote investment with clarity and sustainability. Some examples include an enhanced ETS that drives a stronger price for carbon and incentives, demand and supply incentives that go hand in hand so we can build the transition together with the same time horizons. And market rules, including certification for renewable and low carbon hydrogen. These are just a few policy examples we believe could help the investment case. It's key that we have certainty and forward momentum because we need to move quickly. Some of you might be familiar with Shell's scenarios, which we have used for decades to help stretch our thinking and inform crucial choices as we grapple with the dilemmas and tough energy and environmental issues. Now, Shell's EU sketch scenario shows that to deliver net zero emissions in the EU's energy system, clean hydrogen alongside renewables such as wind and solar and offshore wind would need to rise from very negligible levels today to at least 10% of the EU's total final energy consumption by 2050. And this is part of overall deeper electrification. Rapid deployment of hydrogen as a key decarbonization tool will be critical to achieving global net zero emissions, which is why today, through the Sustainable Markets Initiative Hydrogen Task Force, I have launched a set of policy recommendations aimed at accelerating hydrogen adoption through the global economy. Shell believes that hydrogen will be a vital part of our clean energy future. And we are backing that belief with tangible investments here in Europe. For example, we started Europe's first and largest PEM green hydrogen electrolyzer. And in time, we plan to expand its capacity from 10 megawatts to 100 megawatts. Shell is also working with partners to build a green hydrogen hub in Rotterdam. In 2022, we expect to take an investment decision on Holland Hydrogen 1, a 200 megawatt electrolyzer in the port of Rotterdam, supported by offshore wind. And we're collaborating with industry counterparts such as Daimler Trucks, AG, Iveco, OMV, Total Energies, and Volvo Group through H2 Accelerate to build a commercially viable hydrogen trucking system throughout Europe, which should lead the world. Shell's focus is on both blue and green hydrogen for practicality. We believe green hydrogen can be competitive by 2030, but supply and demand must grow in parallel. And policy advancements to address the overall electric system and its reliability are key to enable the green hydrogen expansion as well. The proposed mandate to change 50% of industry's gray hydrogen consumption into green and to incentivize the use of green hydrogen in road transport is a great start. Meanwhile, moving quickly in the energy transition means using blue hydrogen as a low carbon option to cut emissions, stimulate a sustainable hydrogen market, and bridge the transition to green hydrogen. There is a lot that companies like Shell can do as a business. However, there are limits to what society can achieve without a clear and aligned policy framework needed to align, guide, and motivate all of us who are on this journey across the energy system as a whole. This is why conversations like today are so important. If the world wants to achieve the goals we have set out in Paris, we need to move faster, and to go faster, we have to work together in an aligned manner and take a full systems approach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Brinton, for that. And there's quite a few questions coming in from readers who, I'm sure it hasn't escaped your attention, are asking about the group of NGOs that have pledged to boycott events sponsored by fossil fuel companies like Shell. And indeed, when we hear your plans about green hydrogen, it's very impressive. But we also can't disregard the mind-blowing Dutch lawsuit that came down, or the decision earlier this spring, where Shell was ordered to slash its CO2 emissions 45% by 2030, which is, if you want to compare, let's say a Shell to the EU, I mean, it's not as ambitious, shall we say, as the bloc's targets. But at the time, Shell called it disappointing as a verdict and said that they would appeal. So I'd be curious to hear a response as far as the allegation that sponsoring events like this with a logo in the corner allow Shell to benefit from this impression that they are part of the solution, if at the same time they're fighting against these sort of legally binding or orders to clean up their act and to have it imposed on high.
Well, America, thank you, and for the listeners for the question. First of all, companies like Shell have a vital role in the energy transition. We're a good company, and we support the involvement and participation. In terms of the NGOs, we welcome the diversity of opinions. They help shape the debate. But events like this and gatherings with the plurality of voices is key to helping the energy transition advance faster. Part of industry and society depends on a mix of fuel types today, and companies like ours are accelerating our overarching decarbonization. So if you think specifically, you go back to our Capital Markets Day and our strategy that we announced earlier, pre the court case, you'll see that we had set very aggressive and ambitious accelerated targets. As a matter of fact, 45% faster, 45% faster than we had a few years before. So actually, what is happening in the case is simply supporting the direction that we had already put forward in our Capital Markets Day and was supported at our AGM by our shareholders to further accelerate. And so the key is that Shell is already leaning in that direction and accelerating in that direction. Specific to your point about an appeal, that is simply around the legal point that as a publicly listed company, we need to also be able to have the freedom to act and move forward as a listed company. So it's simply the point about the legal aspect, not about the ambition, the targets, and the goals of which the company is firmly focused on. And as a leader of the green business, I was hired in from the outside, in fact, to do that and have successfully led the energy transition in 3 different big integrated utility and power companies on 3 different continents. And so part of that energy transition is recognizing we have to move from today to where we are going tomorrow, but we cannot let society drop. Our customers, our households, people still need to keep their lights on and do so in an affordable and as we're accelerating sustainability.
Well, thank you for responding to that, frankly, and we will be watching you, I suppose we can say, in the months and years to come to see just how quickly you're pushing that transition. And now I would like to, I guess, switch back to the task at hand. Low carbon option. We hear that phrase a lot when we talk about gas-based hydrogen these days. And yet, just this summer, it was a quite influential study that came out of Stanford and I believe Ithaca, New York University, Cornell, excuse me, in which there were quite a few scenarios modeled out based on existing data. And people said, you know, blue hydrogen, hydrogen made from natural gas, where you catch the CO2, for those who may not have been following all our previous events, may not be as low carbon as we had anticipated. So what I would like to do is perhaps start with Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. We know that coming up later this month, there might be a list of IPCEI's important projects of common European interest for hydrogen. I'd be very excited to hear an update and perhaps if you can say how many of those are blue hydrogen and how is the Commission dealing with this, you know, methane leak blue hydrogen revelation, if one can say, or perhaps just reminder.
Good morning, and I hope that you can hear me. And well, this is a wonderful start to this discussion. So, what is important for us is to create a well-functioning hydrogen market. And in the initial phase, we need really to scale up both the production and consumption, and that was the reason why when we presented our hydrogen strategy last July, and we emphasized the need to create a complete hydrogen ecosystem, it was covering both renewable hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen, because we need to scale up production facilities, and at first stage we need also lots of renewable power to produce hydrogen. Indeed. So right now we can say that with this summer's Fit for 55 package, we are providing the regulatory framework to create this ecosystem. And we do have good allies under the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. We already see that industry is ready to deliver concrete projects at scale and on time. We know, for example, that that number of proposed electrolyzer projects already exceeding the 40 gigawatt target that we set for 2030 for renewable hydrogen. And already 14 member states so far have introduced their own hydrogen production and infrastructure under their resilience and recovery plans. So we are prioritizing green hydrogen. But full-scale industrial deployment of clean hydrogen, it requires coordination along the whole value chain. So, of course, more renewable power generation and bigger electrolyzers, but then it needs also innovation in end consumers, and we have to solve this chicken and egg situation where no one will start producing green hydrogen if no company wants to use it. And at the same time, energy-intensive sectors cannot convert to carbon neutral processes without having the guarantee of supply. So your direct question was about those projects of common European interest. I can't say exact numbers of different projects, but what I can tell you is that at this moment, we are still prioritizing the production and scaling up electrolyzers that produce green hydrogen.
Okay, all right. Well, now you mentioned the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. We have Mr. Chattomatakakis here from Hydrogen Europe, which was instrumental in putting that together. And as far as close allies, I'm very curious to hear, would you have any other information that we might be able to scratch at? I've heard a rumor that there's a list of projects coming. September 10th is the date that I've heard. But if you can give us any information about these projects and, you know, how should we be looking at this? How many are blue? Is that a problem? How to go forward?
First of all, thanks for setting up this wonderful conversation right after the summer. And indeed, there has been work over the summer, especially in August, by the member states. I really have to say in French, chapeau, because they worked hard and they presented projects. But they were pushed, companies in the member states were pushed very hard by their governments. And you can imagine that the companies that could react in that short time were big companies. I think we need also to give a chance in a second and another wave to the whole value chain, to the smaller companies, especially the electrolyzer and fuel cell producers, to be engaged even more actively. However, it's quite encouraging. So it's more than 400 projects have been presented, which is a huge number. It exceeds by far what Commissioner Simpson Kadri just mentioned, what a year ago was expected when the European hydrogen strategy was released. The blue and green discussion should come to an end in some 5 to 8 years. Blue is a transition. And the project that you see here clearly depict this dilemma of chicken and egg that we have to overcome. And I think NGOs are absolutely invited to discuss with us this timeline. So until when you would accept a blue project that is not reaching a decarbonization rate of 90%, because that is the standard that we as Hydrogen Europe have asked for. And this is a quite high standard of decarbonization, and current technologies hardly can reach that. However, chicken and egg, we will later on see Daimler. Daimler is producing already fuel cells for trucks. The trucks will be on the road in the next years. Do we have enough green hydrogen for these trucks? Possibly not yet. So we need to use decarbonized hydrogen from other sources, but again, with high standards of decarbonization and no leakage, no methane leakage. That's absolutely clear. But until we are ready with green, which is, Kathleen mentioned, the electrolyzer business is being built up, which is to be expected in some years, we need to let these trucks run. And that is why, to overcome chicken and egg, we need as a transition technology, blue, but only as a transition. It's absolutely clear that the priority lies on the green hydrogen production, on the renewable hydrogen production. There is no doubt. And we are happy to see that the Hydrogen Alliance, the Clean Hydrogen Alliance is growing, is still growing. It's 100 times as big as the Battery Alliance, says the Commission. And also the IPCIs are so encouraging. So we are witnessing a historical change of course. So there is a new setting of course, is very disruptive, and we need all companies involved in doing that. Thanks.
Now, so if I heard you correctly, we've got more than 400 projects, and due to the, let's say, quick nature by which large companies, mostly fossil fuel companies, I can imagine, can present projects, I didn't quite hear a number on how many of those are gas-based projects, but we are very clearly getting to kind of the nut of the problem, which is the fight between those who say we need volumes now, and those who say, well, we need to ensure that it's really going to cut emissions. Because I can imagine Commissioner Simpson won't be pleased if 10, 20 years down the line, we realize that by getting this market started, we were actually burning so much more and polluting so much more methane, which is just so powerful that we may have actually undercut, the goal of the EU's climate laws. Now, one thing that I've heard that kind of rung a bell here was that, green is taking too long. The renewable rollout is just too slow. And on this point, I would very much like to get the Portuguese Minister, Matheus Fernandes, his perspective on this, because the Portuguese presidency has just wrapped up, and there were very intense negotiations about the future of the EU's cross-border energy infrastructure. And there was quite a tough, hard green group of companies countries, not companies, who were very, very much pushing for strict renewable requirements. And so, Minister, how do you feel when you are pushing for this on one hand, and yet you keep getting kind of hit in the face with this idea that renewables are just not going fast enough? I mean, what more can we do? What needs to be done in order to cut that red tape and get this out? Because otherwise, I don't see how green is ever going to get its foot in the door at this rate.
Well, good morning to you all. And I have no doubt that this is really an important talk, because hydrogen is a priority, both at European and national level. So we really should discuss those energy visions about hydrogen, and mainly the green hydrogen. Since electrification is not a panacea, a one-size-fits-all solutions, hydrogen will play an important role in promoting the decarbonization of sectors of the economy that currently have few alternative technological options, and where electrification in the short and medium term could result in significant costs, or is simply technically unfeasible, such as the industry and the transport sector. So to achieve its full potential, it is very important to make progress and take the next steps to make its price competitive and create a market, while maintaining investment in research and innovation to develop the necessary infrastructures and implement measures of certification of origin. It's really important to give priority to international partnerships and cooperation, as they are a key role to answer the challenges to scale up to hydrogen market, cost reduction, and reinforce the learning curves in each country. We believe that Portugal, as a country from Southern Europe, can have an active role and push forward the broad use of hydrogen, particularly green hydrogen, becoming a key element in accomplishing Europe's decarbonization goals. As an ambitious and innovative country with a robust track record in renewables, we bring forward our commitment and our current state of play in hydrogen field and contribute to the global market. We do have the right resources, very competitive conditions, both for solar and wind. We have the lowest price on producing solar energy, solar electricity worldwide. And we also have a strategic geographical location that can facilitate exports to the main consumption sites located in the Northern Europe. To bring these features forward, several mechanisms are already being implemented in Portugal, such as a regulation of the injection of renewable gases into the national natural gas network, a system for warranties of origin system for renewable gases, which is already legislated, and concentration of financial resources available in national and European funds. Just for you to have an idea, in the scope of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, Portugal will have allocated 185 million euros to support the production of green hydrogen, and there are 750 million euros for the decarbonization of industry, where the gases of renewable origin, including green hydrogen, naturally will be considered in the support for investment. And in the first phase, we expect that investments in projects of this nature are mainly focused on the industry and transport sector, in the logic of self-consumption through investment support and translating into a lesser need for production support. The implementation of these projects will foster synergies between the various promoters and phases of the value chain, allowing for economies of scale and risk reduction.
Minister, can you hear me all right?
We have no doubt how important green hydrogen is, how important it is for Portugal, and the very good conditions that we have to produce this green hydrogen. Yes, we have to scale up some technologies. Most of all, we have to create a new market for this.
Minister, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask a question regarding the Portuguese presidency and the negotiations that were happening between countries. Now, obviously, Portugal is blessed with a lot of sun and has all its chances before it to produce renewable hydrogen. But there are a few things you mentioned in your speech just now regarding international partners, regarding scale-up. And I would really like to hear from your perspective as a country in Southern Europe that has this ace in its hand of renewable hydrogen to restart the market, to create jobs. When you hear people saying, well, it's going too slowly, we need to let natural gas take over. When you hear them talking about getting hydrogen from across the world and bringing it over with that CO2 footprint unattended, I mean, how do you feel about this with all those fierce negotiations that were happening in the spring to keep as green as possible this cross-border energy infrastructure? How do you feel when on one hand there you are, and then you've got the German Ministry of Energy coming with its list of requests for industry? I mean, is this a struggle for you as a green country?
Yes, it is a struggle, but things will happen faster than people think. I have no doubt that those who are in the market are full aware that if they still invest or even just depend on fossil fuels, they'll be out of market in just a few years. We have very good examples to show in Portugal. When we build our roadmap for carbon neutrality, we believe that the electricity produced from coal should end at 2030. When our prime minister begins to be a prime minister, he said, no, it will end on 2023. And what happened is that it simply ended on 2021. So natural gas, yes, natural gas, it's good or it's important for the transition, but I can never say for how many years we will use natural gas. Things will really happen very fast. And for this, we have to make the right investments and we have to have the right logistic. And the problem that countries like Portugal can have is that we have to go through Spain to reach the center of Europe. And we know, and Portugal is very committed with that. We have the presidency of the council when we decided on the 10Es. It's impossible to financial new energy infrastructures for with with European money if those infrastructures are to transport fossil fuels, but definitely the blending have to be a very good hypothesis for countries like Portugal, because otherwise, when the cheapest green hydrogen in Europe that will be produced in Portugal is already to go into market, we won't have the infrastructure to do it.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that response. Now, I'd like to go over to Representative Jens Geier, Socialists and Democrats from Germany, who was rapporteur on the EU's hydrogen strategy back all those months ago. And I'd be very curious to hear from your perspective, from the parliamentary perspective, whether what was imagined then is unfolding now. And before I do, I would like to just, I have here a copy of the draft delegated act for the upcoming, let's say, sustainable fuels formula, as it stood in about April of this year, so this past spring. And so we're not yet talking about Fit for 55, which will probably only be negotiated in trilogues in about a year. We're talking about something that's expected later this fall, which will be kind of the first guide for what hydrogen, as far as renewable hydrogen is concerned, is going to be able to be. And it's interesting because it's quite strict. Or at least it does seem that way to the lay reader. You know, it says it's got to be renewable. You've got to have the principle of additionality, right? You need to have new renewables on the system that aren't already receiving subsidies. You got to make sure that where the hydrogen electrolyzer is producing hydrogen has to be vaguely in the same geographic area, you know, producing in the same 15 minutes every hour. You got to really be able to prove it. But then it says, you know, well, and if you can do that, you know, maybe we can just, as long as you're burning, if your percentage of renewables is higher than it was 2 years ago, that's okay. We'll count that in. So, and this is something that I think is done in cooperation with the Guidehouse consultancy. They're leading the stakeholder meetings on this. But MEP Geier, you know, when you see how this is developing, do you feel that we're staying true to the hydrogen strategy?
Good morning, and thank you for having me, and good morning to all the colleagues. Nice to see you again after summer break. Yes, up to the moment, I think it is going pretty much the way that we have envisaged in our report on the hydrogen strategy. But there are crucial things coming up now. Let me come back to the huge amount of green energy that we will need very soon. So the way we lay out the new renewable energy directive will be a critical success factor for the hydrogen strategy. And because this is so, I'm very much in favor to be a little bit more ambitious than the Commission has pointed out in its draft, sorry to say, Ms. Simpson, due to the fact that a lot of stakeholders out there are promising that the quota of renewables can be bigger than what the Commission has expected. So I've been in touch with the guys from Solar Europe, for example, who has explained to me that they have a lot of studies for every member state of the European Union that can point out how big the potential of renewable energy, I mean, there's Solar Europe, so here it is especially solar energy will be. And so I'm very much in favor of quotas for the future, not one quota for all the member states, but quotas in the increase of renewables use. Then second, and this is also not in the picture yet, but already mentioned, we need the gas market directive for hydrogen in order to create the business cases. Because yes, there's a lot of enthusiasm on the ground for hydrogen products. I've seen a lot in summer, and it's really encouraging to see engineers, you know, getting creative on how to get the job done. But at the end, investors need security what they get, and you need business cases, and you not have to have an idea on the return of the money. So the market order is really key now for building up the business cases and make the money run. And due to the fact that we still, for the time that we can oversee, we still have not enough renewable energy. I'm a bit critical about the concept of additionality. I mean, there is a lot of potential for CO reduction that we can exploit immediately. We can bring down the CO2 emission in a conventional blast furnace steel factory by 20% when we exchange coal with hydrogen. We can bring down the CO2 emission in a steel factory when we build up something that is called a direct reduction construction. That is already running with ArcelorMittal in Hamburg, and this spring we expect the investment decision of ThyssenKrupp in Duisburg to build such a thing. So there are things that we can do immediately with hydrogen, and I'm very much in favor of using it. And the concept of additionality, in my opinion, is not furthering this subject, because all these additional plants have to be built, and I don't see that this, given my German experience, runs very, very smoothly and is a fast process. So I'm very much in favor of using what we have immediately.
Okay. Well, so I hear you out, and now you mentioned steel. I'm going to take us over to steel in a second, but given that the issue of conditionality is on the table, what I've seen as far as what's coming up is still from the spring. So I would be curious if Commissioner Simpson might be able to let us know whether this concept of additionality is still reflected in the upcoming draft delegated act. And this is just a reminder for those at home. So the Fit for 55 package that MEP Gar was just mentioning again is not the same as under the current Renewable Energy Directive, which is already in force, which will have a draft delegated act that will be coming out this year that will take place immediately. So in this, which is really the first step for what will define what is renewable hydrogen in the EU, which will get the market started. Commissioner Simpson, do we still have those assurances as far as additionality, as far as tracing the origin for the renewable energy that's powering these machines?
Yes, of course, and it has been also there for the current RED too. Before I'm giving answer to this question, I wanted to react also to the previous comment that you made, that there is a risk if we will tolerate the CCS installations, and by doing that, the blue hydrogen might emit in the future also CO2. So I wanted to make a remark that already in our hydrogen strategy, we stated that we will consider hydrogen to be a low carbon hydrogen only if the reduction of the emissions compared to current production is significant. But on conditionality, well, this is already there under the RED 2 in the transport sector, and additionality requirements. And in our revision of the RED 2, we are also introducing a sub-target for the use of renewable hydrogen in industrial applications. So the associated requirements for additionality have also been expanded now to other application areas. And this work with the delegated act has started already. DG Ener is engaged with consultants, and there are also consultations with stakeholders. And now I can say that well, after we have decided how to translate this input into a delegated act, so that it will be in according to our regulatory requirements. We will present it already this year, this delegated act.
Okay. So now steel, the blast furnace, coke and coal. We've got to take this to Mr. Axel Eggert in Eurofair, who's our fishbowl participant, as we call it, in Politico, which means we bring someone on for, let's say, about 5 minutes, and when we talk about a little piece of it. Now, you and I have spoken quite a few times, Mr. Eggert, regarding the plight of the steel makers in Europe, where they be, the carbon border tax is coming down. People want to take away their free emissions allowances. But one of the things that strikes me the most about this, and we hear about it all the time, is that, if you want to redo your steel factory and be competitive and still keep it, you've got to get it right, because you're going to be keeping that factory, that infrastructure, for something like 20, 30, 40, who knows. So I remember once you and I spoke, and I said, well, why don't you just transition to natural gas first? There are some factories that do that. It cuts down from the coal emissions. And you said, well, maybe we should rather wait, because if we're stuck with this gas, fired plant, by the time renewable hydrogen is ready, better to wait and get it right. And so I'm curious, since that conversation we've had probably about 6 months ago, how are you seeing this discussion? Because there is quite a lot of coal. I think it's something, 6 or 7% of steel production is the emissions in the EU. So when you hear about all these fights between the hydrogen is being sold to you as being cleaner, but now people are saying, well, no, it's more polluting. How are you seeing the steelmakers in the EU and the choices that are facing them right now?
Yeah, thanks a lot, America. Thanks for the invitation to this event. The European steel industry is probably the industrial sector most advanced in terms of decarbonization projects. And part of that, a big part of that, is hydrogen-based steel making. We have the possibility, of course, also to use in a transition natural gas to provide the energy we will need to the new installations. So the projects which we are working on have the aim to reduce our emissions by 2030 by at least 30% compared to 2018 levels, which is round about 55% compared to 1990. So we would be on track to achieve the EU emission reduction target, of course, under the condition that the policy framework is right and giving the right incentives. To doing this, we will need probably at least 1 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. And of course, we are competing here with other sectors who have also a request to receive hydrogen. We will need the infrastructures to do that. And we believe that the European steel industry is well based to get the infrastructures, because as you mentioned, we have 6% roundabout of the EU's total CO2 emissions. But these emissions are mainly in primary steel making in the integrated sites which we have in Europe. And the number of that is 20 today. So this is a limited number of sites where we can reduce the EU's emissions by 5% roundabout if we decarbonize these sites. So we need to provide the infrastructures, we need to provide the hydrogen. So we can, with the new technologies, also use natural gas in a transition. We can, on the site, blend natural gas with hydrogen. It all depends on what is available on the market. And for that reason, we have, of course, some conditions that we need to make the investment. Therefore, we need to get funding. We need the IPCIs, and this is very welcome. We have proposed round about 50 projects for the IPCIs on high technology readiness level. Many of those are based on hydrogen. But we need, of course, also the legal framework to do that. And to now in the RED II proposal to oblige the steel industry to have a certain percentage in renewable energy in its production is not the right way, because we are not producing the hydrogen. So this obligation should be somewhere else. We will use the hydrogen if it's available at affordable prices. And for this, it is also important that we have access to support, financial support that can be done via contracts of difference, carbon contracts for difference, that can be done with the new coming up climate, energy, environment aid guidelines. But we will also need a competition between the new hydrogen providers, the new infrastructures, the network operators, so that the cost of hydrogen, be it blue or green, will be competitive. We expect that our cost per ton of steel may increase by 30 to 100%. In the beginning, probably 100%, but that depends mainly on the operational costs, and this is mainly the hydrogen or other renewable energies. So there's quite a lot to do, and one of the points is, of course, also why now cutting down in the Fit for 55 package free allocation substantially, while at the same time we are coming out of a crisis. We need to make the investment. We would prefer to give us the time until 2030 and then make a stronger cut in free allocations, and not already now.
All right. Well, Mr. Egger, if I've heard you correctly, I've heard we've got 20 coal-fired sites that are really responsible, for vertically integrated steelmaking sites for the emissions. Bottom line is what you care about. Whether it's blue, green, or any other kind of hydrogen, if it's cheap enough and you've got the outfit, you'll burn it. So I guess that's a message from a regulatory perspective, the Commission. If you can get green hydrogen cheap, quick, and get it to the steel industry, you know, they'll use it. They're not married to gas-based or any other type of hydrogen. Now, I'd like to just take a quick gander over to the transport sector here. We've got Manfred Schuckert, head of emissions and safety for commercial vehicles for Daimler. For those of you who thought that hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles were dead, you've got another thing coming. And I'd be curious, because there were quite a few projects announced last year showing, not by Daimler, but in the European transport sector generally, you know, showing that hydrogen-powered vehicles were available. You ask a little more and you say, well, you know, it's not clean yet. We've got to show that we can do it. So actually, it's just the very, very emitting hydrogen, just to show that the technology is there. But as far as Daimler is concerned, you know, what for you are you looking at this fall in terms of legislative steps? What are the signs that you need to kind of see whether this is going to be viable and whether you're going to go ahead with it?
Yeah, America, thanks a lot for this question. I think we have already a very ambitious regulatory requirement set in place. So we don't need more regulations. We now really need to work on to comply with the existing ones. Of course, we see in the Fit for 55 package a tendency by the Commission also to strengthen or to tighten the reduction targets for the next decade and more. But I think that's not the question. The question is really now how we really can come up with technology solutions our customers can use with, let's say, not only reduce CO2 emissions, really with zero emissions. And that's now the target. And there is hydrogen, which plays a decisive role, especially in the heavy-duty sector. We have today more or less two solutions which we developed. The one is the battery-based zero-emission technology, and the other one is the fuel cell hydrogen technology. The one is more for the shorter distances, and the other one is more for the longer distances. And that's why we are so active right now, really to develop the technology. And I have to tell you, America, we presented last year already our solution, which we call Gen H2, which is really a long-haul truck capable to run on, let's say, even up to 1,000 kilometers or more without refueling. So that's really the way we want to, and the decisive thing now really is, as we also have in I was one of those lucky guys who worked throughout my holidays in August to provide an application to the European Commission on a really important, very important IPCEI project. And finalizing that really is now very decisive. So, of course, now we would like to see the reaction by the Commission. We hope to have a soon approval by the Commission, but it's really decisive that the Commission is quick and let's say active in providing an answer to those IPCEI proposals.
Thank you very much. And now I'd just like to take a few questions from the audience because they have been pouring in. It looks like this one would be for Commissioner Simpson, but not only in the Commission, is that now when a carbon border adjustment mechanism, the carbon border tax that everybody has been talking about, comes into effect, will it also be applied to hydrogen imports?
Well, there are pilots, and right now, at the energy perspective, we are planning to introduce it to electricity. But of course, we will incentivize our partners to produce green hydrogen. In this regard, there are already some of our neighboring countries who do have very favorable weather conditions, who are eager to discuss how they can, in the future, retrofit their existing natural gas pipelines so that they can start transporting green hydrogen. So there will be mainly market for green hydrogen in our side. And according to the national strategies, we already see that after 2030, our industry most probably will consume more green hydrogen than we will be able to produce here. But from our own side, with the Renewables Directive, we are trying to shorten the permitting process so that even by 2030, the scaling up of offshore windmills or onshore installations will be possible.
Okay. And Minister Matos Fernandes, what is being done in order to speed up those regulatory blockages that are slowing down our renewable rollout?
Well,
Minister?
I will say, I don't have, in your question, there's one opinion, that things are going very slow. And that is not true. Through new technologies that are coming into market, through the scale up of old technologies, through the new ways of have state rules to be sure that we can put green hydrogen into the gas grids. So I think that things are going really fast, since we are, of course, looking to something which is brand new. We have, at the first time, the faith that electrification could be almost a synonymous of decarbonization. Now we have no doubt that that is not true. Yes, we should put all our bets on the electrification, but we still need to have gases, because especially for heavy transportation, for chemical industry, it's quite impossible to use electricity. So things are going in very fast. The IPCEI projects are almost concluded, and I do believe that we will have many good news in the near future. In Portugal, we are having those very good news with technology to build electrolyzers and with green hydrogen being already produced.
Okay, thank you for that. One question over to MEP Geyer, just because he comes from Germany, and we are talking about low carbon electricity here. We know that Germany, but not only, is part of a suite of countries that are about to turn off their nuclear reactors, which those of you at home will know is not green, but is low carbon, almost zero CO2 emissions. And so do you worry about the ability to supply all of that electricity? We've just heard from the Portuguese minister. It's not only direct electrification, it's also, we need that electricity for the electrolyzer. Is there a worry at all?
No, not so much. As you rightly said, it is without CO2 emission, but it is by no way sustainable. And one of the reasons that Germany, after some haggling, decided to go out of nuclear power is that the question how to where to put the nuclear waste safely is still not solved. And because of that, German politics decided to go a non-nuclear and sustainable way. We need some power from fossil energies for quite a while. We decided that Germany will drop out of coal in 2038. That means until then, the fossil-fueled energy plants will run as long as they need it. That means when we are faster with renewable energies, when we are faster with low carbon gas energy plants, then we can go out of coal earlier. So it is a step-by-step plan. And it is a plan that also relies on a European solution, because that will only work when we work together with our neighbors and we have a really European grid with more interconnectors. And we need also a storing technology. But given all that, I'm optimistic that it will work.
Okay. Well, I'd like to get the point of view of Mr. Chatzimarkakis, because you know the project so well. Hydrogen Europe has prioritized green hydrogen, they say, but you know, from your perspective, the let's say, you used to talk about the currency of carbon, if I recall correctly. You used to say, forget about blue, forget about green, you know, magenta, pink, just look at the CO2 content. And that's exactly what is going to be coming up in the legislation in coming months. You know, we're going to have a standard that's going to say, if you can get cleaner than this, you know, full speed away. What do you think are the concerns? What's on your mind in these coming months? What do you would like to tell the Commission, Commissioner Simpson, about this, about what needs to happen in this rollout?
Well, my concern is implementation. We need now to really be fast in implementing, and I agree with Minister Matos Fernandes that we are fast, but we need to stay fast. I mean, just imagine 1 year ago, the hydrogen strategy was released by Kadri and her colleagues, and Jens quite fast responded for the Parliament, and the Council was even more elaborate than anybody else here. So we have the strategy, and after not even a year, the Fit for 55 package, which is 3,000 pages, it's 12 legislative proposals, 1,000 mentionings of hydrogen, puts, so to say, a legal framework to it all. Member states like Portugal, and the Minister mentioned it, have put aside money for these projects. So that was really, really fast. Now we need to implement. Hydrogen Europe is implementing some of these projects, and we call them lighthouse projects. We selected 4 of them, and Portugal, of course, will be one of the included countries. 4 of them that we really would like to push forward to be implemented even faster than all the other projects. And guess what? Most of them, not all of them, are absolutely mainly renewably oriented. So this is the speed we need now. And on additionality, my concern is that we stay to the April regulation that you just mentioned. What we need is clearly to stick to additionality. Nobody doubts that. We need more renewable installation in order to make hydrogen orbit. Nobody doubts. However, we cannot prove it every 15 minutes. We should prove it in bidding zones or on member state level, on a trimester, semester, or even yearly basis, but stick to the principle. Just the way to implement it will be another one, or should be another one. That's our concern, but I think we can get a good solution there.
Okay. It seems like a moment in which I actually would like to bring back Ms. Brinton from Shell, because for a company like yours, it's about regulation, right? There's a framework that the Commission, that national governments put out, that they tell you what the rules of the game are, and then you adjust your business strategy accordingly. So from what you've heard and from what you've seen, how do you see your upcoming projects coming out? You know, you talked earlier in the beginning about this desire to cut CO2. Could you tell me a little bit about the percentage, perhaps, of how many of these projects are renewable, or how much are going to be gas-based, or what you might tell all the people at home who are watching and who are perhaps concerned about or doubting, you know, this very slick kind of corporate communications, and it's not a takeaway. I mean, everything is slick. This is a very nice setup here. But for those who see, the Shell logo in our corner throughout this hour-long discussion with governments, how would you like to reassure people that this regulatory framework is something that's going to actually set Shell up to really, really cut emissions and contribute to the goals?
Well, your question gives me the perfect opportunity to thank Commissioner Simpson for her bold leadership last year in setting forward the hydrogen roadmap. It's a really great example of how regulation does create the investment certainty for publicly listed companies that have to deliver a shareholder return. So if you're familiar with California, I had the privilege of being part of that energy transition previously in California, where the legislation and regulation set a clear pathway for green hydrogen and for vehicle transition. And so as an example for that, Shell then won a very successful bid in my mobility team there in California. We were awarded over $40 million from the California Energy Commission to build 51 new refueling stations in California. As a result, we partnered with Toyota. They introduced their Toyota Mirai, their hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and over summer, consumers who purchased the hydrogen fuel cell Mirai, we set a world record in hydrogen fueling in California. So there was a direct result of positive regulation, set investment certainty. We could then invest our capital with confidence and boldness. It was supported also then by government, which helped us leapfrog forward to cover some of the costs because it wasn't a commercial at parity yet. So we were able to go first, faster, earlier. That partnership with then the OEMs accelerated that transition, brought commercial vehicles into the market. And again, we set a world record over summer, over the travel holiday season. And so too, we're very excited, and I mentioned it earlier, our partnership that we have in Europe, and it includes Daimler and Volvo, the OEMs, for example, we call it H2 Accelerate. Here again, because of the leading policy that the European Union is setting forward across both not only hydrogen, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, as well as overarching renewables, which addresses electricity power market reform. It has to include transmission, distribution, all the pieces of infrastructure. As a result of that partnership with those OEMs, we can lead in together. We're investing in the infrastructure and the greening and cleaning of the fuel supply. And then the OEMs can have confidence, because for consumers and society to make the energy transition, we have to have that alignment of supply-demand balance. So
Ms. Britton, you mentioned
the policy really works together.
Well, you mentioned California, you mentioned all of these hydrogen-fueled cars over the summer, but how much of that was renewable?
So what we're doing is we are building solar. I don't have the exact percentage off the top of my head, but we're very active in renewables across the Americas, including California. And so one of the things we've been doing in California, our business has been providing, for example, green electricity to households through community choice aggregation. So we're actually the green renewable, 100% renewable supplier to many of the community choice aggregators across the state of California.
All right. I'd be curious to get those numbers anytime you might have a chance. It'd be very interesting to dive into how much of these hydrogen volumes being available in fueling cars are powered by renewable electricity now. I know we're almost out of time, or pretty much out of time, and everybody's probably going to run to their virtual meeting in a minute. But what I would like to do is go around quickly to each of our speakers, and in 30 seconds, if you could tell me your legislative wish on hydrogen before the end of this year. And I'd like to start with Commissioner Simpson.
Well, before the end of this year, we are also putting on the table the hydrogen and gas market decarbonization package. And of course, it doesn't address only hydrogen, but we will also propose how to create a hydrogen market and how to address this dedicated infrastructure. But overall, it also will help us to facilitate and integrate more renewable and low carbon gases in the existing gas grid. So not only hydrogen, but also concerns how to inject biomethane. And then we will also address the consumer perspective so that we will make sure that gas and electricity consumers will have the same consumer rights in the future.
Okay, fair. Minister Matos Fernandes, do you have a hydrogen legislative wish for the end of this year?
Well, the legislation is already approved. What we are going to put in better conditions is all that we have in according to the general electrical system. But we have already all the legislation that we need to produce and use hydrogen.
Okay, fair enough. MEP Geyer, what would you like to see in the hydrogen space before the end of this year?
The finish of a parliamentary procedure for an ambitious RED III directive and a gas market regulation that makes hydrogen produced and investments running.
Short and sweet. Mr. Eggert, your wish for hydrogen in the next few months?
I'm not sure whether you want to point out to me. Axel.
That's Mr. Eggert from Eurofair.
Yeah, we would like to see access to affordable hydrogen. That needs to be secured, and the Fit for 55 package and the energy guidelines can help providing this. Thank you.
Okay, and let's go to Daimler with Mr. Schuckert.
Thanks, America. A quick approval of the IPCEI processes project. So really that we get our trucks as soon as possible on the road of Europe.
Okay. Mr. Chatzimarkakis, what does Hydrogen Europe wish for?
We need to overcome the chicken and egg dilemma with a switchboard to bring auctions together with the contract for difference. And we need a global certification scheme. Hydrogen is a global commodity, needs guarantees of origin. That will be the priority of this year.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you at home for waking up early on this Tuesday morning to hear a back-to-school update on hydrogen. Again, I'm America Hernandez with Politico. And please do keep in touch, write, send emails. We're writing stories all the time. And we'll see you in a few months for our next event.